a little discombobulated. Do any tournaments?
Put a flag in the
The town keeps taking it.
They play on Saturday at Hamden Academy. The girls must play on Saturday too. Sharon, do you know what time the girls play on Saturday? Do the girls play on Saturday?
They've got more
Oh,
games.
it's not.
Because Saturday's the A teams and girls still have the game tomorrow night,
Oh, okay.
so, yeah.
But you have to go to Canada.
I know, I was
Canada
wondering.
to get
She's checking out the score.
She's modeling.
Okay. Oh, almost an accident.
Thank you. Okay,
Right, let's try that again.
ready? I pledge
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear us okay. We're gonna go through the budget review for 2023 to 2024.
Yep. So this is draft one. If you don't have a copy, let me know. You should have one. And I will do what I typically do, if that makes sense, run through the front sheet, then run through the significant changes in the lines. And if there are any questions, you just need to let me know.
Thank you, borrow your pen.
All right, so if you look at the front page, that's really the cover for the entire budget in a summary. You'll note that the gross budget is up $275,000, 3.48%. The local share, which is the piece that the town pays, is up $0. It's the same as last year. The reason for that, if you go back up, is we have an additional subsidy of $32.42 over last year, but also utilization of carry forward money of the $321,882 at the top of the page is how that offsets the increase to the town, which will keep the increase to the town flat. The bottom number we always put on there for state valuation, the increase of $11,883,000. We do that because valuation is the second biggest indicator of what you receive for subsidy behind number of students. We were at 3.06% increase for the town. The state was at almost 6%. So as long as we stay behind the rest of the state, you don't see a dip in your subsidy. You kind of stay level or get a little bit more. That was relatively quickly, but so if you look, the bottom line is up top. The total budget is $8,170,959. That's an increase of $275,000. There's zero increase to the town between the utilization of the carry forward money for the $321,882 and then the increase in subsidy of the $32.42, which is now subsidy for us is $3,988,306 from the state. So before I go through the actual line item budgets, is there any question on the front, because this is your summary of what the total will be both for the budget but to the town? Okay, hearing none. If you turn the pages, I will say what I say to you every year. The majority of this is gonna be salaries and budgets. I will go through those significant swings and change them, but it's gonna be salaries and budgets because, salaries and benefits, because that's what a school consists of is personnel. And so that's generally where you're gonna see it. And even the tuition number is, again, salaries and benefits. If you look at the first one, we will go to line 6. and line 7, which will give you the combined change on line 13. That's salary of the nurse. We had one nurse retire, and we hired the replacement nurse. That's simply the shift in the benefits they take, but also the salary based on the years of experience. The person coming in has less experience than the person that retired. If you skip down to line 24, superintendent's office, there are two things that impact that there. The audit, we had to do a single point audit because of federal dollars last year. That shifted the way we had to capture this. So the number there isn't the actual change in the office per se, it's a change in how it's accounted in the audit from last year required to this year. Your actual change is closer to about 18,000 because you have airline revenues and other things that offset there, but you're not gonna see that on this side. Which I know is as clear as mud, but I'll take any questions you have on that. It's simply the outcome of that audit. Okay. Office of the Principal Services, you're gonna see salaries and benefits for both administration, secretaries, that all shifted. That's based on the negotiated agreement. And hitting a different tier in what the compensation was, like numbers of vacations, days, given that piece. One of your biggest hits, if you move down the line 55, will be the addition of the SRO. That's the cost of having the SRO. Line 55. And so that's a new cost compared to last year, so that's why you'll see the increase there. If you do the next line, 59, 60 and 61, that'll be the change in both personnel because we had Mr. Ring retire. His replacement, the increase for the custodians, and also just understanding that that used to be, again, from the audit funneled through the AOS, and so there are offsetting revenues that you don't capture in this line anymore because of the change to that piece. I'm sure that's not for that.
There's a scary tiger wandering around up there.
Okay, if you go to vehicle operations, you will see again the increase there of purchase contract. It's part of the collaborative we do with Hancock County. Reminder, when we walked away from first student, the majority of that will also be wages. If you aren't aware of it, minimum wage went up to $13.80 this year, which means it shifted everything again. 6 years ago, we were about $7.50, so you're gonna see that continue to trickle through. I did go back and pull it if we had stayed with first student and you back out what we've done for a contingency fund, we're 100,000 less than we would have been with first student at this point. Just so you know, if people ask how it's going very well. And we've had much better control. We still have the bus contingency in there, so when the loan payment goes away, the contingency should be enough so that in the next 5 years after that, we should be able to start to cycle our buses in and out without there being any impact to the community. And you're funding that through the additional subsidy we're receiving from the state based on switching from contracted services to owning our own buses. The next line you're gonna see, line 95, the drop in 31,000. That's fictitious because if you go down to line 112, you see the increase to 47,000. That's simply a shift in personnel, both seniority and movement in the staff, as we've had a teacher retiring, so that shuffle has started. But the rest of that increase is also your negotiated agreements. If you go to line 129, your next big one will be salary of guidance. That's a change in personnel, so the person coming in was simply on a different step than the person that left. Salary curriculum is a similar scenario. If you go to line 152, you're gonna see benefits ed tech. That's just a change in what people have taken for the ed tech benefits. And then if you get to our favorite category, tuition, line 162 through 166, there are a couple of things there, just to make sure we understand. Tuition is not set until December of the year you're in, so the number for this year just came out about 6 weeks ago-ish. A couple of things happen with that because it's not set until the year that you're in. It's based on last year's budget, divided out by the students, so everybody uploads it after July, and that's where those numbers come from across the state. However, because it's for the current year that you're in, the state gives what's called an inflation kicker to up it to whatever this year is. Because of what's happened with inflation, we typically budget around 5%. This year, John Baptist went up to 6.25%, and Brewer went up to a little bit over 4%. So those numbers all trickled through, so even though you see a drop here, it's not what we had hoped for, because we are seeing those big classes leave, but it did reset it for next year based on not only the number, but the inflation kicker, which was significant. It's never been that high in my tenure. Just so that you understand that. It's based on the number from last year, but then they put the inflation rider on it to try to level the field for this year. And you'll see that in our next meeting, which we usually do in January, but that's where that number comes from. So the drop is because our bigger numbers, we lost 26 this year, and we're losing 21 next year based on projections, because we all know there are move-ins and outs. But those numbers are going out. The question that's always asked is, what is the cost at Brewer? It's $10,235 per student. What is the cost at BAPS with the insured value factor? It's $13,312. And so those are your differences.
Cost for Hamden?
Yeah, it's, hold on, I think it's 9,800.
I'm good with Rob.
Yeah. Hamden is currently at, hold on, I don't remember.
It seems like we're getting more of a shift. that
We are,
way,
we've
so-
got 22 there, they're 9,700. And it's all over the board. Bangor's at 12,600. Old Town's at 10,500, Ellsworth's at 12,200, and these are ones that we typically have students attend. Orono's 12,500. So it's a mix of where we have kids. But our number 1 is Brewer, number 2 is Hamden, number 3 is Bangor currently.
Okay.
Bangor or Baps?
No, for public.
Oh.
BAPS would be,
Oh.
BAPS has about 55 kids, Brewer's at 119, Hamden was at 29, and Bangor was at 14, 12, somewhere in that range. Other questions on that? Okay. If you turn the page, our next big line will be 188. That is special education tuition. We have 3 students who we have essentially in outplace self-contained programs. But also we have students who are moving to the high school who are receiving more special ed classes. That number is not captured in the tuition number. Special ed is always individualized. It's not part of the tuition number at all. So when we pay tuition, anybody who receives special education gets anything beyond that. Any questions on that piece? Because that can be a little bit muddy. Okay. Line 197, the salaries teacher, you're gonna see the increase of 64,000. That's also a little bit spurious. It is for your special ed teachers. However, we also have a student who requires a one-to-one nurse throughout the day, so that's where that line gets captured. The line below it is ed tech. You'll see the drop of 25,000. That has to do with the shift in personnel. And then the next lines that you will see, which I'll spend a little bit of time talking about, is towards the end. The big shift will be 269 through 271. Social worker, you have had a social worker here for a number of years. We did that through a partnership with Northern Lights. Northern Lights can no longer provide the social worker because they can't hire anybody. So we've had to hire, which we've done through the AOS board, but we've had to hire it independent of Northern Lights. So that cost that you see is shared, that's our section of it, compared to Dedham and Airline, the social work is shared across all 3 schools. However, one of the reasons we went with Northern Lights was because they were able to offset some of the costs there as well. That piece is gone, so this is gonna look like a new piece in your budget. It's not as far as a position goes, it is as far as how we account for it in the budget because of the shift from an outside provider to our own personnel.
So did it come out of a line?
So it dropped some of special education, but it was overrun by the other costs in special education, so you're really not gonna see it.
Is there something about the resource officer, or just that?
Yep, so that was
Oh.
under maintenance, you'll see it on line 55. The increase there is 130,000, it's right on the first page.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes,
That's a contract with the Penobscot County Sheriff's
Correct.
Office? Is that a one-year number, or is that
that's a
month?
one-year number.
And then that would be renegotiated for, it's gonna be a year at a time?
It's a year at a time, so there are 2 things there. One is it's under the contract that the town currently has with them, so they end up negotiating that, which typically happens after Sheriff Morton negotiates with their union on whatever those wages are. And then the other piece that would indicate, or that might potentially change that, is if that person left and somebody came in that higher experience or anything like that.
Okay.
But yes, it'll be 1 year, but then I believe the town goes on a 3-year contract cycle, correct?
This is our first year.
Yeah, so it should be, so we should have that year in the second year, unless that person changes, that it should be fairly consistent.
Great.
And I think he had said it was something like a 2.6% increase. Do you remember?
I think
Somewhere around that range, I don't know.
he said he was gonna honor the town's contract with the SRO.
Right, so that we should come in at that number and stay consistent. Okay. Other questions?
And you may have answered this, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
don't be
late.
sorry, no.
Back,
that-
back on page 1, I
Yep.
think I may have asked this in the last meeting. Is it the benefits on line 7? Because I noticed the salary goes down significantly on the nurse, but the
Yep.
benefits, is that because somebody wasn't taking it and now they
Right,
are?
yeah,
Okay.
we had the person retire, they were at a higher step, it took less benefits, and
Yep,
this person came in at a lower step, it
Okay.
takes more
That's
benefits.
what I thought.
Yep.
I just wanted
Yep.
to clarify.
Absolutely, no.
So in the food program, so I don't know exactly how it works, but school lunches have still been subsidized this year.
Yeah.
Is that like a forever and everything now, or we don't know?
So
Like,
that's
would
the-
that change that number?
That's the plan, but they can change it every legislature if they choose to.
Okay.
My understanding is the intent is to continue carrying that forward, but that doesn't mean they can't introduce a bill to change it if they do in the future.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Other questions? Any from the crowd?
I don't know if this game has gone into overtime or what. The fourth quarter was starting when we started. It's been a really long quarter. The suspense is killing me.
We're gonna take a break between meetings, so. If you're comfortable with it, I would recommend that you vote approval on this. If you have more questions, I'm glad to answer any of them. We don't have our budget hearing until May with the town.
So we would be just voting to accept the draft?
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't have more questions, if you have more questions, then I'll gladly answer them or any other comments. For the sake of the select board, that'll be 6 years in a row that you haven't had an increase to the town, and I don't know how sustainable that will be in the future, just to put that out there. But we will
And
do
on
it,
behalf of the town, I think
yeah, but we will do what we can.
it certainly makes my job easier.
So, can I ask a question?
You of course?
If you're budgeting for benefits that someone's actually taking versus what they could take,
We have,
and somebody leaves mid-year and you have to replace them?
we have a projected 8%
Okay.
to try to cover that, because we also know we're gonna be hiring people, like, the next
Mid-cycle.
meeting, you'll see that we have a teacher retire, that kind of thing, so
Yeah.
we're gonna be shifting somewhat. I will say that typically what you saw with the nurse is what happens. Typically those with more experience take less, and those with less have more of a need for health insurance just because of the timing, but yes. We won't be hung up to that, I hope.
I was just curious. In my world, we budget
That's
for everybody
right.
taking everything.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Other questions?
James, you said this, but I just didn't catch the number.
Yeah.
The state, what was the average state valuation increase?
About 6%.
About 6%, so
Yeah.
ours is about half of that.
Yes, yeah, which is what helps us on the subsidy side with valuation.
And so we're down students compared to last, I mean, to be only
Yep.
getting like 3,000 more from the state.
Right, so we dropped 26 out of high school
Yeah.
for the sake of this. But we ended up picking up here about another 15, so we ended up dropping about 10, which is why we were able to stay somewhat flat.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. We won for those at home. Other questions?
The decrease in secondary tuition students is going to continue to decrease.
Yes, yep. So,
Apparently, there were many more, most of the decrease was in private education.
and that shift has to do with more kids going to public now than before. And I think Hamden takes that population as well. I really
The
do.
high percentage went public,
Yeah.
students all.
Right.
Yep,
The sophomore class this year is the last like big class.
yep. So we should have 2 or 3 more years where we see that, depending on move-ins.
Hamden being the least expensive school,
Yes.
John Baptist being the most expensive
Yes.
school.
Yep.
With that shift, it makes a pretty big difference.
Right. Other questions or comments? Then I would recommend you approve it unless you have.
Okay, can I get a motion?
Sure.
Okay, any, all right, all in favor to approve the budget as written? No?
Thank you all.
All right, I think that concludes
Meeting
our
adjourned,
meeting.
Yeah,
Have a little break and then
we'll start the next one.
start the next one. So we won, is that what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go check if you want to take 5 minutes, because I gotta set up and Andrew's gotta come in and change over.
Time does the next one start? I wonder when we're gonna eat dinner. I'll be back at 7. Huh?
We're taking 5 minutes.
Oh, we're taking 5 minutes. He told me I could go home and eat.
Nope, we have it right on the thing.